Hello, welcome to the Purple Planet, where we help you drift into dreamland with the timeless and historical tales of queens, empresses, priestesses, and warriors from across the ages. The wind once howled through endless pines, pulling white sheets of snow across a land both wild and ancient. In the heart of a long ago winter, under a sky bruised with clouds, the world was a study in contrasts. The hush of falling snow, the distant roar of the Dnieper River, the smoldering ruins of what had once been a thriving Slavic town. Ashes swirled on the icy ground, mingling with the blood of the fallen and the blackened timbers of homes. Through the chill, a figure once moved, veiled, silent, her steps deliberate. Her boots crunched on frozen earth, her cloak trailed behind. She paused, surveying devastation. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. They reflected neither sorrow nor satisfaction, only a kind of ruthless clarity. This was Olga of Kiev. To some, she became the embodiment of vengeance, an avenging widow whose wrath left cities in ashes. To others, she was the unlikely architect of an empire, a Christian saint whose vision outlasted her enemies and laid the foundation for centuries of Russian and Ukrainian history. In the flickering light of memory, one could walk beside her, through blood, fire, and faith. How did a woman become both monster and martyr? How did a queen, widowed and beset on all sides, seize power in a world ruled by men and violence? Was Olga a monster, a mother, a martyr, or something altogether more complex? Journey now through the forests and palaces of ancient Russia and discover the truth behind the legend. The year remained uncertain, perhaps 890, perhaps as late as 920 CE. In the shadowy forests around Pskov, near the winding Velikaya River, a child was born whose name would echo through the centuries. Olga. Her origins were as mysterious as her legacy. Some said she was of noble Slavic stock, the daughter of a local chieftain. Others whispered she was Varangian, a descendant of those Norsemen who rowed their longships down the rivers, seeking fortune and conquest. Olga's childhood world was a place in flux. To the north, the Varangians, men from the east, as the Slavs called them, had established themselves as rulers and traders, intermarrying with the local population. Their leader, Rurik, reportedly founded a dynasty around 862, bringing order to the fractious tribes of the Rus. By the early 10th century, the Federation of Kievan Rus had begun to take shape. It was a world of wooden fortresses and pagan rituals, of trade with Byzantium and tribute from the Slavic tribes. The Dnieper and Volkhov rivers served as the highways of this young realm, carrying furs, honey, and amber to the great markets of Constantinople and beyond. Into this world, Olga grew up, shaped by both the sword and the plow. She learned the customs of her people, the sacred fires of Perun, the feasts and dances, the harsh realities of survival in a land where winter could last half the year. She heard the stories of the gods and the ancestors, and watched as the Varangian princes carved their names into history with both cunning and blood. Around 903 CE, according to the primary chronicle, Olga married Igor, the son of Rurik and the Prince of Kiev. Igor was a man of ambition, still young, but already hardened by campaigns and court intrigue. Their union was not a love match. It was a political alliance meant to cement the ties between the ruling dynasty and the tribes of the north, Olga, perhaps just a teenager, became the Princess of Kiev, catapulted into a world of power and peril. Kiev in those years was a burgeoning city, a wooden citadel on a high bluff above the Dnieper, its streets crowded with traders from all corners of the known world. Norse and Slavic customs mingled in the smoky halls. Olga was a quick study. She learned the language of power, how to negotiate with chieftains, how to read the moods of warriors, how to survive in a court where betrayal was nearly as common as bread. With Igor, she ruled over a realm held together by both force and diplomacy. The tribute system, whereby tribes paid the Kievan princes for protection, filled the coffers of Kiev, but also bred resentment. The Drevlians, a powerful Slavic tribe to the southwest, simmered with anger at the heavy demands placed upon them. For more than 3 decades, Olga remained in the background, her influence subtle but growing. She bore a son, Sviatoslav, securing her place in the dynasty. She watched as Igor led his warriors on raids against the Byzantines, collected tribute from rebellious tribes, and navigated the treacherous politics of the steppe. Yet beneath the surface, tensions mounted. The Slavic world was changing, fractured by old rivalries, threatened by new enemies, and drawn ever closer to the glittering empire of Byzantium. Olga, ever watchful, sensed that the storm was coming. She did not yet know that it would claim everything she held dear and set her on a path that would transform her from princess to legend. The year was 945 CE. Prince Igor, now in his 40s, set out to collect tribute from the Drevlians, one of the richest and most troublesome tribes under Kievan rule. He was accompanied by his retinue of warriors, confident in his authority. The Drevlians, led by their Prince Mal, had other ideas. According to the chronicler Nestor, Igor's greed proved his undoing. Having collected his due, he decided to return for a second payment, hoping to squeeze yet more gold and furs from the Drevlians. This proved a fatal error. When Igor arrived at Iskorostin, the Drevlian capital, modern-day Korostin in Ukraine, he was ambushed. The Drevlians, determined to rid themselves of Kievan overlordship, seized the prince. Their method of execution was as gruesome as it was symbolic. They bent 2 young birch trees to the ground, tied Igor's legs to them, and then released the trees. In an instant, the prince was torn apart, his body ripped in 2, his blood soaking the earth. The news reached Kiev like a thunderclap. Olga, still in her 20s or 30s, became a widow. Her son, Sviatoslav, was just a boy, too young to rule. The throne of Kiev hung in the balance. The Drevlians, emboldened by their victory, sent envoys to Olga with an audacious proposal. She should marry their Prince Mal, cementing an alliance and placing Drevlian interests at the heart of Kievan power. They believed Olga, alone and vulnerable, would have no choice but to comply. They did not know her. In the smoke-filled halls of Kiev, Olga gathered her advisors. The fate of the realm and her own life hung on her response. She moved swiftly, with a cold pragmatism that would soon become legend. First, she secured her position as regent for the young Sviatoslav. The Kievan nobles, wary of Drevlian aggression and respectful of Olga's lineage, accepted her rule. She strengthened her bonds with the Varangian Guard and the loyal Slavic chieftains, ensuring that any move against her would be met with steel. Then she turned her attention to the Drevlians. They had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated the woman who now held the fate of Kiev in her hands. The chroniclers recorded Olga's response in tones of both horror and admiration. She would avenge her husband, but not with an open battle. Instead, she used cunning, deception, and the cold logic of retribution. Before the year was out, the Drevlians would learn the price of crossing Olga of Kiev. Her transformation was complete. No longer simply a princess or a consort, Olga became a ruler in her own right, equal to any prince, feared by her enemies, and soon revered by her people. The age of Olga had begun. Olga's revenge unfolded in 4 devastating acts, a sequence of brutality and cunning that echoed down the centuries as one of the most legendary episodes in early Slavic history. The Drevlians, eager to secure their alliance, sent 20 of their noblest men to Kiev to formally propose marriage between Olga and Prince Mal. The envoys arrived in the city, laden with gifts and arrogance, certain that the regent would accept their offer. Olga greeted them with courtesy, concealing her true intentions. She invited the envoys to her palace and offered them the hospitality of a bathhouse, as was customary for guests of high rank. The envoys, unsuspecting, shed their armor and entered the steamy confines of the wooden bathhouse. Once they were inside, Olga's soldiers barred the doors. At her command, the bathhouse was set ablaze. The Drevlian envoys, trapped and unarmed, burned alive, screaming for mercy that never came. Their ashes mixed with the steam, rising into the winter sky. With the first delegation destroyed, Olga sent a message to the Drevlians. She had accepted their proposal, but required a second group of envoys to escort her to Iskorosten in proper state. The Drevlians, still oblivious to Olga's wrath, dispatched their most distinguished men, the best men who ruled the land of Dereva, as the chronicle put it. When they arrived in Kiev, Olga welcomed them with apparent warmth and invited them to a feast. During the banquet, as the guests grew drunk on mead, Olga gave a signal. Her soldiers closed in, slaughtering the envoys where they sat. By the end of the night, the palace was awash in blood, and another generation of Drevlian leadership was wiped out. Still not satisfied, Olga announced that she would travel to Iskorosten to mourn her husband and perform funeral rites. The Drevlians, desperate to remain in her good graces, prepared a grand funeral feast. At the banquet, Olga's men served food and poured drink, encouraging the Drevlians to indulge. Once the guests were thoroughly drunk, Olga gave the signal. Her warriors fell upon the revelers, slaughtering them without mercy. According to the chronicle, more than 5,000 Drevlians perished in a single night. With the Drevlian leadership decimated, Olga led her army to Iskorosten, intent on destroying the city that murdered her husband. The siege dragged on, with the defenders holding out bravely. Olga, ever the tactician, devised a plan both ingenious and cruel. She sent word to the besieged. If they offered tribute, she would spare them. The exhausted Drevlians, desperate for any hope of mercy, asked what she required. Her reply was deceptively simple. Give me 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each house in the city. Relieved, the Drevlians complied, sending their birds to Olga's camp. That night, Olga's soldiers tied small bundles of sulfur and cloth to the legs of each bird. At her signal, they set the bundles alight and released the birds. The birds, frightened and burning, flew home to their nest in the wooden rooftops of Iskorosten. In moments, the city was ablaze. Flames leapt from roof to roof, consuming the town in fire. The people fled into the night, only to be captured or killed by Olga's soldiers. Historians have long debated the literal truth of these events. Some suggested the tales were exaggerated, meant to terrify enemies, or justify Olga's later sainthood by emphasizing her transformation from pagan avenger to Christian monarch. The chronicler Nestor, writing nearly 150 years later, may have embellished the story for dramatic effect. Yet the psychological truth rang clear. Olga's acts, whether precisely as recorded or mythologized in the retelling, represented a seismic shift in the politics of Rus. Her vengeance was not simply personal. It was a message to all who would challenge the authority of Kiev. In a world where the strong survived and the weak were crushed, Olga proved herself as formidable as any man. Olga's revenge was more than brutality. It was strategy. With her enemies destroyed, she consolidated power in the region, reorganized the tribute system, and placed loyal governors over the conquered Drevlian lands. She ensured her son's succession and stabilized the realm at a moment of grave peril. And yet, behind her cold logic lay the grief of a widow and the determination of a mother. She avenged Igor not only for herself, but for Sviatoslav, and for the future of the Rus. Olga would not allow her dynasty to fall. In the ashes of Iskorosten, a new era was forged. With her enemies cowed and her son's throne secure, Olga turned from vengeance to statecraft. The years after the Drevlian campaign found her focused on the task of building a stronger, more unified Kievan Rus. Olga was not content to rule by fear alone. She introduced reforms aimed at rationalizing the collection of tribute, replacing the arbitrary raids of the past with a system of fixed pogosts, or administrative centers, and uroki, or set tribute amounts. This innovation reduced the likelihood of rebellion and increased the efficiency of governance. For perhaps the first time, the far-flung lands of the Rus were managed as a coherent state. She also strengthened ties with other tribes and foreign powers, using marriage alliances, trade, and diplomacy to secure her position. Olga's court became a hub of cultural exchange where Norse, Slavic, and Byzantine influences blended into a unique civilization. In 957 CE, Olga embarked on one of the most significant journeys of her life. With her son Sviatoslav, nearing adulthood, she traveled to Constantinople, the glittering capital of the Byzantine Empire. Her purpose was twofold: to negotiate a favorable trade agreement and to explore the possibility of Christian baptism. The Byzantine emperor at the time was Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus, a scholar and diplomat renowned for his treatises on governance and court ceremony. Olga's arrival was an event of great significance. She was received with honors befitting a sovereign. According to Byzantine sources in the primary chronicle, it was during this visit that Olga was baptized as a Christian, taking the name Helena in honor of the emperor's wife, or the Empress Helena, mother of Constantine the Great. The exact details remained shrouded in legend. Some accounts suggested that Constantine himself served as her godfather, a role that complicated his subsequent proposal of marriage. When the emperor made overtures of matrimony, perhaps to cement an alliance, Olga responded with characteristic wit. How can you marry me after you yourself baptized me and called me your daughter in Christ?" The emperor was left both amused and frustrated, outmaneuvered by the diplomatic acumen of a foreign queen. Olga returned to Kiev as a Christian, perhaps the first ruler of Rus to embrace the new faith. She built churches, invited priests, and sought to convert her people. Yet the transition was not easy. Sviatoslav, now of age and a warrior in the old pagan mold, rejected Christianity. The boy who watched his mother avenge his father's death had no interest in the soft religion of the Byzantines. Still, Olga laid the groundwork for the future. She established a Christian community in Kiev, planted the seeds of literacy and learning, and built bridges to the wider Christian world. In time, her grandson, Vladimir, would complete the work she began, baptizing the entire nation in 988 CE and earning the epithet the Great. Olga's conversion was not simply a matter of faith, it was a masterstroke of diplomacy. By adopting Christianity, she aligned Rus with the most powerful empire of the age. She gained access to Byzantine trade, culture, and prestige, lifting her realm out of the shadows and onto the stage of world history. At home, she navigated the tensions between old and new, balancing the demands of pagan chieftains with the promises of Christian civilization. She was, in every sense, a proto-European monarch, pragmatic, visionary, and unafraid to challenge the expectations of her time. The years passed, and Olga's influence endured. She ruled as regent until Sviatoslav came of age, then retired from the front lines of politics, but remained an honored advisor and matriarch. Sviatoslav, for all his prowess as a warrior, never matched Olga's subtlety as a statesman. He spent his reign campaigning against the Khazars, the Bulgars, and the Byzantines, expanding the borders of Rus, but rarely pausing to consolidate his gains. Olga, meanwhile, turned her attention to matters of faith and family. She continued to support the Christian community in Kiev, built churches, and championed the rights of widows and orphans. Her palace became a center of learning and piety, a refuge for those seeking wisdom in a violent age. In 969 CE, Olga fell ill. She was perhaps in her 70s or even 80s, a remarkable age for the era. As she lay dying, she gathered her family around her and implored them to embrace the faith she had adopted. Sviatoslav, respectful but unmoved, promised to honor her wishes, but remained a pagan to the end. Olga was buried in Kiev in a Christian ceremony. Her tomb became a site of veneration, first for the faithful few, then for the growing community of believers. In 1547, nearly 6 centuries after her death, the Russian Orthodox Church canonized Olga as a saint, bestowing upon her the title equal to the apostles. Her feast day was set as July 11th, and the churches across Rus and beyond celebrated her as both a founder and protector. Yet Olga's true legacy lay not in stone or ritual, but in the transformation she wrought. She shepherded her people through an age of violence and change, bridged the worlds of paganism and Christianity, and planted the seeds of an empire that would shape the course of Eastern Europe for a millennium. Her grandson, Vladimir the Great, finished what she began, baptizing all Rus in the Dnieper River in 988 and ensuring that Olga's vision endured. Even he admitted in moments of humility, that it was his grandmother who lit the first candle in the darkness. Through the centuries, the story of Olga of Kiev was told and retold, shifting with the needs and anxieties of each generation. In medieval chronicles, she was both feared and revered, a pagan queen whose vengeance was matched only by her piety. In Byzantine accounts, she was a cunning diplomat, able to outwit even the most sophisticated emperors. In the prayers of the Orthodox Church, she became a saint, whose intercession brought hope and healing. Yet Olga's legend was also a mirror, reflecting the ways in which power, gender, and memory intersected across the ages. In a world dominated by men, she was both celebrated and condemned for her strength. To some, she was an unnatural woman, a ruler who dared to wield violence and command armies. To others, she was a model of resilience and justice, a mother who defended her child and her people at any cost. In literature and art, Olga appeared as both monster and martyr. In Nicholas Rorik's paintings, she stood as a spectral figure, half saint, half avenger. In folk songs and tales, she was remembered for her cunning and her courage. In modern Ukraine and Russia, she was venerated as a mother of the nation, a symbol of unity and endurance. Her story resonated with themes that remained as urgent in modern times as they were 1,000 years ago. The price of justice, the limits of vengeance, the power of diplomacy, and the struggle for faith in a world of doubt. In 2015, the Ukrainian parliament declared the year of Saint Olga, celebrating her as a founder of the nation. Statues of Olga stood in Kiev and Pskov, their faces serene but watchful, reminders of a past that was never truly gone. Through all the retellings, one question remained. Who was Olga of Kiev? Was she a monster, a mother, a martyr, or something beyond all these labels? Perhaps she was all of them, a woman who refused to be defined by the limitations of her time, who forged her own destiny in a world of darkness and fire. As snow once settled over the ancient stones of Kiev and the fires of history burned low, one was left with the image of Olga, walking alone among the ashes, her eyes fixed on a horizon only she could see. She was born in obscurity, married into power, widowed by violence, and crowned by vengeance. She ruled with wisdom, cunning, and grace, navigating the perils of court and the chaos of war. She built bridges between faiths, between tribes, between centuries. Was she a monster? Perhaps to those who felt her wrath. Was she a saint? To those who found hope in her faith, she was the light in the darkness. Was she a mother? Undoubtedly, her love for her son and her people shaped every choice she made. Was she a martyr? Only in the sense that she suffered for her vision, sacrificing peace for the sake of the future. In the end, Olga of Kiev was all of these things and more. She was a reminder that history was not written in black and white, but in shades of gray, lit by the flicker of torches, the glow of candles, the embers of memory. And as this story closed, one remembered the line between justice and brutality was as thin as the edge of a sword. The women who dared to rule were often remembered not for their wisdom, but for their courage to seize a destiny denied to most. Olga walked that line, and in doing so, became immortal.